good day to brew, baby? What is up, YouTube? It's your boy, Millsy, back with Hometown Commander, and we are back for another episode of Millsy Brews, the show where I brew my version 1.0 deck list of the Commander Infernos on my quest to out-brew your favorite Magic channel. We are coming to the tail end of Commander Masters. We've seen the full set for Wilds of Eldraine, so next week we're going to start our Wilds of Eldraine content. And I had a few commanders left for Commander Masters. What I wanted to start doing was kind of going back and finishing up some of the decks that maybe I started or didn't completely finish, and finally release them. And the one that was kind of off the top of my list that I wanted to do was Otrimi, the Ever-Playful. This is a commander from the C20 commander decks. But I'd started messing with Otrimi mainly in Dominaria United when Ivy was released. I thought maybe that was a card that would work well for this deck, and I started kind of playing with it. But it got put on the back burner for other decks, and the list just ended up sitting. So I thought, why not have some fun? Why not bring it up to the current release and talk about it? If you're just interested in seeing the deck list, it'll be down in the description. But otherwise, let's get rocking. Otrimi the Ever-Playful is a 3 black, green, blue, 6/6 legendary nightmare beast that has Mutate. If you didn't play during Ikoria, Mutate was a mechanic where you could cast the spell, the creature spell for its mutate cost, by choosing a non-human creature you control, and you either put the mutate creature on top or the bottom of the stack. How this would work is if you put a creature on top, you're going to keep the stats of the creature that's on top. If you put it on bottom, you would just get the abilities of the creature. So you basically create this massive stack that has all these abilities, and every time you mutate onto a creature, you trigger all of the mutate abilities of the stack of creatures. Now, I could probably do a lot more to explain Mutate. Mutate is a very interesting mechanic, but I think that's enough for us to talk about what kind of the goal is. So for 4 mana, we can mutate it. What's cool is we can mutate it out of the command zone instead of hard casting it. So that's great. Otrimi can come down a little bit quicker. Has trample. It says whenever this creature deals combat damage to a player, you can return target creature card with Mutate from your graveyard to your hand. This is really great because when that stack dies, right, all the creatures are going to go to the graveyard. This is going to allow us to bring them back to our hand. And as you'll notice, these mutate abilities, Otrimi doesn't have a mutate ability, but a lot of the creatures in our deck do have mutate abilities. You'll notice that they get the better the more times they go off. So we want to build these stacks, and the thing that people had figured out over time is that you can actually copy the stack, and it will copy with all of the abilities that stack has. And so we can just manipulate these giant stacks of creatures for our benefit. We'll talk about the mutating creatures as we get up into the creatures. But I first want to start with the mana base. As you can see, this is a deck I'm trying to dump lower onto the money scale. I still think this deck can do a lot of things, even without high-cost staples and things like that. The land base, we're playing the Shocks, and we're playing a couple of the Dominaria United dual lands just because we're playing some mono-green ramp spells like 3 Visits and Nature's Lore, and those can actually go get these guys. We're playing Opulent Palace. We are playing our Triumph, as well as our 2 Snow basics that have forests on them. But we are playing a ton of basics as well, so our check lands will come in untapped. Hopefully we have the Pain lands. You can see we've got a good mix of lands, and I think if you want to go up even further, you can take out some for fetches if you want to, and other things. I just think this works pretty well. We do run the risk of some of these guys coming in tap, but again, it allows us to also have them being searchable. For enchantments, I think the biggest new one that we got that kind of probably plays into this deck really well is Vesuvian Diplomancy. It says whenever you cast a spell that targets only a single artifact or creature you control, create a token that's a copy of that artifact or creature, except it's not legendary. The cool part about this card is when we go to mutate onto a creature stack, basically this is just going to create us a copy of the stack as it was, at the time of cast. So this is just going to make us copies of these stacks that we're creating. What becomes important about that is then we can bounce the original stack back to our hand or get it back to our hand somehow and then continue to mutate with those creatures to get, more and more value. I think at the end of the day, we want to try to get the creatures back to our hand so we can mutate them again, re-trigger our abilities. And some of ours are very good, so we want to make sure that we're kind of trying to get into this as much as we can. Aqueous form to try to get one of our creature stacks to be unblockable. What that's going to do is hopefully deal a ton of damage to our opponents, especially the bigger it gets. Asceticism, creatures we control have hexproof, so they'll stop our opponents from targeting them, and then 2 mana to regenerate, which will help keep the stack alive. Garruk's Uprising, giving everything trample. And then if we do have a creature come in that's not mutating, we can draw some cards, hopefully. Hadana's Climb seems like a really interesting card for a deck like this. Beginning of combat, we put a counter on a creature, and then if that creature is 3 or more, we transform it on the back, turn it into a land that will tap for a mana of any color, but then it will also just give a creature flying and +X, where X is its power, so we could potentially just help a creature get in for more damage. Phyrexian Reclamation is going to help us get those mutate creatures from the graveyard. If we can't get them back with Otrimi back into our hands, we can use them again. And then Season of Growth feels like a fun card here. Whenever a creature comes in, we scry 1, but whenever we cast a spell that targets a creature we control, we draw a card. Every time we mutate, basically, we're going to draw a card. So that's going to work out well for us. As far as artifacts, Arcane Signet, Chromatic Lantern, the Decanter, Soul Ring, and Manascape Refractor are our mana rocks. Manascape Refractor is a card that was originally released in this precon that I think is kind of fun. It comes in tapped. It has activated abilities of all lands on the battlefield. We can spend mana, though, as it were mana of any color to activate the costs of Manascape Refractors. It's just a fun card. It's going to end up tapping for anything we want it to tap for. We can copy our opponent's lands abilities if we need to do that. I just think it's a fun 3 mana rock. We're playing these Swiftfoot Boots to hopefully protect one of the stacks, and then Trailblazer's Boots to potentially make one of those stacks unblockable to help hit our opponents. Getting into our spells, we put a little bit of mana into our removal, a little bit of money into our removal. Assassin's Trophy and Kid Half, so anything that Deadly Rollick can hit, exile any creature, and if we have Otrimi on the battlefield, on the top of a stack, we can use it for free. Remember that only the top of the stack is the name of that creature, so if Otrimi's on the bottom, I don't believe Deadly Rollick would count as us controlling our commander. I'd have to double check on that ability, but that'd be my guess. Pongify for some cheap removal, and then Reality Shift. We have Brainstorm for some draw. Double Major can copy a creature spell, except it isn't legendary. Seems like a pretty good spot for Otrimi. Girl Spiral for some ramp. Simic Charm can either make all of our things hexproof or bounce one of our stacks back to our hand. And same thing with Unsummon. Unsummon could be used to bounce one of our opponent's creatures back to their hand, but really we want to be able to bounce our own stack back to our hand to kind of redeploy the Mutate. The other way we're going to use to bounce things back to our hand is going to be Ninjutsu. It's just another little mechanic we can use, and we'll talk about a couple of those creatures we have when we get up to the creatures. Sorceries, we're trying to play a little bit of ramp, Cultivate, Farseek, Kadama's Reach, Nature's Lore, Rampant Growth, and 3 Visits. 3 Visits, Nature's Lore, and Farseek are all going for those dual lands. Cultivate, Rampant Growth, and Kadama's Reach are all going for those basic lands that we have. Extinction Event and Gaze of Granite and Toxic Deluge are our removal pieces of choice. Extinction Event is a black removal spell, a master removal I've always liked. It's kind of odd because, and that is a pun, because you choose odd or even exile each creature with that mana value, so it can definitely, unfortunately, not hit certain things that you want it to hit, but I just think it's a really fun spell. Gaze of Granite hits all non-land permanents, so that's pretty great. You can get rid of some things. Toxic Deluge, of course, classic black board wipe, and it certainly works pretty well. Mythos of Brokos is kind of interesting. 4 mana to get 2 permanent spells from your graveyard back to your hand, but if we play blue and black as well, we get to put something from our library into our graveyard that we could potentially bring back, so it kind of does the Entomb plus, retrieval effect, which is pretty cool. Mythos of Brokos is great if you want to go get a specific mutate thing and you also want one from your graveyard. You can get them both back. And then Slip Through Space, again, make a creature unblockable, draw a card, try to help our stack get through. So I think the best way to talk about our creatures here is to talk about the creatures that are going to mutate and the creatures we want to mutate onto. So I think first we're going to talk about our mutate targets, and then we'll talk about our mutators. Again, If you're not interested in hearing about all the creatures in the deck list will be down in the description, but let's get into it. Blight Mamba is a 1/1 with Infect, 1 in the green to regenerate itself. I think Infect's going to become important because at the end of the day, we're not going to make 12, 12, 15, 15, massive creatures, but I think we have a chance to get in for some good damage potentially, and I think Blight Mamba could be a good way to do that. We do have some ways to give our mutate piles flying, so I mean, if Infect will help us. Same thing with Blighted Agent, can't be blocked, and it's a 1/1 with Infect. Again, feels like even a great target for Otrimi when it comes down, making it a 6/6 Infect unblockable, hitting into our opponents and getting cards back if need be. Eternal Witness can both be. Cannot be mutated onto because it's a human, but it's just going to help us get things back from our graveyard. I think it's going to end up being really important to get things back from our graveyard, especially if our mutate stack dies. Gwenna going to help us out with some mana. The cool part about Gwenna is we can tap it to either cast our creature spells or use abilities of a creature or a creature card, so we can actually use this for the mutate cost. And I believe we should also be able to use this for ninjutsu as well, so that's going to be pretty helpful. I like we talked about, Ivy was the main reason I put this in here. It says whenever a player casts a spell that targets only a single creature other than Ivy, you may copy that spell. This copy targets Ivy. So the cool part about this is if Ivy and another creature are out and you go to mutate onto the other creature, you get a free mutate onto Ivy. So this can kind of build 2 stacks at once instead of just having 1 stack. Mist Syndicate Naga ninjutsuing down in, and when it deals damage we get a copy of it. What I think we want to do with the ninjutsu is if one of our stacks gets in unblockable but it's a big stack, we want to get all those creatures back into our hand, we can ninjutsu it back to our hand, ninjutsu this guy in, then we have another stack to start mutating onto, but we get to use all of those mutates over again. Nizumi Prowler, same thing, ninjutsuing in. When it comes in, a creature we control gets Death Touch and lifelink until end of turn. Nighthawk Scavenger seems like a fun creature to mutate onto. Again, we want to pick a creature that has really good base stats and abilities, and I think that this qualifies for that statement. Flying, Death Touch, Lifelink. It's a 1 plus *3, the star being the number of types of card types among your opponent's graveyard. Hopefully we're playing a good mix of decks at the table where Scavenger becomes pretty good on the base. But the cool part is, again, we can put Otrimi over this, Flying, Death Touch, Lifelink, Otrimi. Again, we can get the abilities. So, as you can see, we just want to pick good bodies to put it onto. Plague Stinger, Flying, and Infect. Again, good body to put it onto. Sakashima's Student is an interesting card. It is one of the most expensive creature cards in our deck, but it's there for a reason. When it comes in, it can either benefit as a copy of any creature on the battlefield, except it's a ninja in addition to its other types. What we can do is bounce a stack back to our hand, have it come in as a copy of another stack. It can do a lot of really interesting things, and I think it feels really good in this scenario. Or later in the game, we hard cast this for 4 and just have it come in as a copy of a creature stack we already have. Copying creature stacks is kind of dangerous, and it's going to become hard to represent on the tabletop, but the kind of fun of Mutate is you're making these massive stacks that you have to deal with. Scootsworm, it just feels self-explanatory. As soon as you get 6 lands, Scootsworm starts making copies of itself. You mutate onto the Scootsworm stack, playing lands, getting copies of the stack, and not just Scootsworm. It could potentially become a mess, but I think it feels really good. We're bringing in the Venerated Rot Priest. This was, of course, very well used in the Ivy decks to kind of help poison your opponents out. We're playing a little bit of Infect, so I think Rot Priest feels good here as well. Whenever a creature we control becomes target of a spell, target opponent gets a poison counter. So if we mutate out of our own creatures, that's considered being, the target of a spell. Spread those poison counters out. Hopefully we can end the game by Infect or, pushing our opponents that way. Venom Throw from the Tyranids 40k deck. Again, Flying, Death Touch, Hexproof. Again, just some protection, not a bad body. And as soon as we mutate onto it, it's pretty cool. And then Wilson Refined Grizzly just seemed like a cool body. Can't be countered. Vigilance, Reach, Trample, Ward 2. Seems like a great body to mutate onto as well. Again, there's probably other bodies that we can find to mutate on. I was trying to just find some really fun bodies to mutate onto, and and kind of try to get a wide range of abilities. The cool part about Ivy is that it's not human at all, so we're going to be able to get around that mutate restriction. I think that's the biggest problem with some of these, was there were some really great creatures, but they were humans, so we had to kind of not use them because we can't mutate onto them. So remember, it has to be non-human. But let's start through all the mutate cards we have in our deck, and you'll start to see, remember, a lot of them are going to say, do this X time, or X is the number of times this creature is mutated. So you need to remember that on the stack. But as you can see, these abilities get better and better and better the more times you mutate. Archipelago says when this mutates, tap up to X target creatures, where X is the number of times it's mutated. Those creatures don't untap during their controller's next untap step. Well, here you go. Here's a way to tap down our opponent's boards and potentially leave them wide open to getting attacked, hopefully for more than one turn. Auspicic Starix. When it comes in, exile cards from the top of your library into exile X permanent cards, where X is the number of times it's mutated. Put those permanent cards onto the battlefield. So Starks is a little bit of a non-bow with other mutate creatures because we don't get to mutate them onto other stacks. They just come down onto the battlefield. But again, this is where bouncing things to our own hand becomes important, because Starks could potentially work with one of our ninjutsu cards to bounce one of these things that got put down back into our hands. We can mutate with it later. Bone Lurker says whenever it mutates, return target permanent card from our graveyard again. Here you go, another way to hopefully get some things back. Bracos, Apex of Forever, one of our big mutator, says it can be mutated from the graveyard using its mutate ability, which is pretty cool. Then that allows you to hopefully get it back on a big stack. Cavern Whisperer, whenever it mutates, each opponent discards a card. Shittering Harvester, whenever it mutates, each opponent sacrifices a creature. So, what will basically happen is, we mutate onto the stack and get all these abilities to trigger again. So hopefully we can make these go off more than once in a turn. Dirgebat, whenever it mutates, destroy a target creature, planeswalker, and opponent controls. Dreamtail Heron, whenever it mutates, we draw a card. Gemrazor destroys an artifact or enchantment whenever it mutates. Gemstone Recluse can go get us a 2+1/+1 counters on it when it mutates. Insatiable Hemophage says each opponent loses X life and we gain X life, or X is the number of times this creature is mutated. This is the important one that we really want to get multiple ones onto, because we could potentially help drain our opponents out. Migratory Greyhound can go get us a basic land. Mind Leecher says whenever it mutates, we exile the top card of each opponent's library face down. We can look and play those cards for as long as they remained exiled. Pouncing Shore Shark says whenever it mutates, you may return target creature your opponent controls to its owner's hand, which is going to be pretty useful. Get some things out of the way. Sawtusk Demolisher, destroy target non-creature permanent. Its controller creates a 3/3 beast, so we can get rid of artifacts and enchantments that way. Sea Dasher, whenever it deals combat damage to a player, we draw a card. Trumpeting Gnar. Whenever it mutates, we get a 3/3 beast. Sea Dasher does have flash, so we're able to mutate that in at flash speed on something that's unblocked if we want to. So, as you can see, we have a subsection here of mutate cards that we're going to try to get into a stack. And the cool part is if we can copy the stack and pull the stack back to our hand, those copies are still there, and then we can either mutate onto that, or we can start building another stack and try to take advantage. There's probably a lot more to this deck than I've determined. I was just trying to have some fun, try to bring Mutate up into the current state of EDH and see if we can find some fun for it. Let me know what you think of Otrimi Mutate down in the comments. Is this a deck that seems fun to you? I'm sure some of this is on Arena. Of course, Otrimi isn't, but Bracos should be. And there's some other things. I know I've seen some Mutate cards in other decks, but I'm sure I know the Ivy deck uses a lot of the green-blue mutate creatures in her lists on Arena, so there's some of this that you can play on Arena if you want to as well. Let me know what you think down in the comments, and I will catch you guys next time.